On Monday, thousands of Afghan civilians flooded Kabul's international airport attempting to flee the Taliban's capture of their country. In an attempt to gain control of their departure at the airport, U.S. soldiers shot warning shots in the air. Shocking footage shows some Afghan nationals desperately clinging to the departing American military jet before at least 2 people fell from the airplane in the sky to their death. In total, 7 died from the chaos at the airport. The Taliban claims that the war in Afghanistan is over. Moreover, they claim that the transition to their rule will be peaceful. The United Nations, as well as other international actors and organizations, have urged the Taliban to respect human rights. However, many are skeptical that the rule under the Taliban will be peaceful. Indeed, the Taliban follows an extreme interpretation of Islamic law, in which women are mostly confined to the home, unable to participate in education, work, and many aspects of society. Furthermore, suspected criminals can face amputation or public execution. Meanwhile, a U.S. official stated that the President Joe Biden stands by his decision to pull out of Afghanistan. Joining us to discuss this further is Kamran Bokhari, the Director of Analytical Development at the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy in Washington. He is also a national security foreign policy specialist at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute. Thank you for joining us today, Kamran.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. To start us off, what has your reaction been to the developing situation in Afghanistan?
Well, look, I mean, it's a disaster in terms of how the United States pulled out, and then it led to a very chaotic evacuation. Not to mention that the Taliban took over the country within a matter of days. So I think that there's a lot of blame to go around. But I think that the withdrawal aspect of this whole issue was set into motion at least in 2014. And we've been seeing a withdrawal process play itself out over the years through 3 successive administrations in Washington. And then there's the aspect of the finalization of that withdrawal, which happened under the watch of President Biden. And I think that that was poorly executed. And then, of course, you don't sign up for this situation, but it happens to you. And everything else from there was just, spiraling out of control. And it's going to cost the president politically. Again, there's a lot of blame to go around, but this is a disaster in many respects. Not to mention that the way this is going to embolden Islamist extremists and terrorists all over the world, who will not only be emboldened by the Taliban's comeback in Afghanistan, but also with the way that the United States appears in the world as having been overwhelmed and fumbling. And so for a president who came to office pledging to restore American credibility after the 4 years of Trump, the opposite has happened. And in a short period of time. So it's going to cost him politically at home, and it's going to cost the United States, geopolitically around the world.
In your opinion, where does the blame lie for the recent escalation?
No, I think that we have to be careful. I think there's a lot of blame to go around. As I said, there are 3 administrations, actually all 4 since 9/11, have had a role. The Bush administration was the one that began the project of nation building and didn't do it properly. And then, this didn't happen yesterday. This happened over a 20-year period. And we're basically seeing all of it explode in the last, several days, and especially yesterday and today. So there is that. Then there's, of course, the people that the United States and its allies partnered with, the Afghan partners, who were essentially warlords who enriched themselves and their family and friends at the cost of the country, and didn't build the structure, but didn't build the institution, despite us having to pour in so much money. And, look, at the end of the day, outside assistance can only help if there are elements on the ground, partners on the ground, that can actually absorb that assistance. And so there's blame there as well. And then, of course, there's the Taliban insurgency was enabled by Pakistani policy over the years, and Pakistan being the most strategic country when it comes to Afghanistan. Obviously, there's no one actor to blame. There are all sorts of actors who did different things, and not to mention Iran and Russia that were also began to support the Taliban. And so, this is a collective mess.
Yes, and there's a whole bunch to talk about there. But in light of all of this, do you think President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan was the right one?
Well, look, I mean, I think the decision to pull out was the right decision. The way it was done was very, very haphazard, very, very rushed. But again, President Biden wasn't the one who cut the deal, on the fast track with the Taliban. That was the Trump administration's decision, which he inherited. And there isn't a whole lot of appetite in the United States for continuing the war. It's very unpopular. So again, we need to lay blame, but lay blame in a manner that's proportionate and that's accurate. I think that the manner in which it was executed by the Biden administration is their fault, and they should be held accountable for that. But there are a lot of people, as I said, there's a lot of blame to go around.
Yeah, obviously it's not one person to blame here. Leading into that, do you think that the international community will ever recognize the Taliban as a legitimate form of government? And if so, what would need to be done for this to happen?
So it depends on who we talk about when we say the international community. We have had China already basically say that they will recognize this government.
When they will not?
That they will.
That they will.
Yeah. And when they do that, how they do that, that remains to be seen. But at least we have statements from the Chinese government saying that they will. We have the similar statement from the Turkish government saying that they need to work with the Taliban. There will be those who will, by de facto, have to work with them, which is the rest of the international community. Pakistan is caught between a rock and a hard place. If this is the regime now next door, you have to work with it. There are obviously those elements in Pakistan who are, celebrating the comeback of the Taliban. There are those elements within the Pakistani state and society, and there are quite a few of them, who are terrified at the comeback of the Taliban. The Iranians also have to deal with this. The Central Asian states are also bordering Afghanistan. So it remains to be seen, what happens. I think for the West, the West will likely try to hold the Taliban feet to the fire. The one leverage that the West has, it's lost the military leverage, not yesterday, but a long time ago. But they have leverage via financial assistance, which the Taliban will need. And the Taliban would not want to rule a country that is isolated and a pariah. They learned that lesson back in the 1990s when they lost their government after 9/11. So it remains to be seen. These guys are going to engage in human rights abuses against women, already beginning to happen against minorities, enforcement of draconian laws, and all in the name of religious law. So we'll just have to wait and see if they're going to behave. The fact that many countries have pulled out their embassies, and that process is still ongoing. For the moment, nobody's recognizing them, and I think this is going to be a long process. We just have to wait and see. Nobody was anticipating this, or at least this quickly. I myself, thought that the regime would collapse. Wrote about it 4 years ago, and over the years, and then I, updated my assessment. And initially, I thought it would be a couple of years, 3 years maybe. But then more recently, I thought that it would be less than that. But no way, even I am surprised by the stunning speed at which this regime collapsed. So to answer your question, the international community has a lot to process. There's so much going on and it continues to go on and will go on in that country, and with an international impact, that we're going to have to make sense of this before we make any moves one way or the other. On one hand, you don't want to recognize a regime like that. On the other hand, you have to deal with that country. So, it's a catch-22 situation.
What, if anything, should the international community be doing to support Afghans?
I think that's so that you just basically put your finger on the heart of the problem. So the state that we thought we built never got built, and which is why it collapsed within days. But we did help engender a civil society, and it would be a complete travesty if we just ignored it because we don't want, and because we're saying we don't want to deal with the Taliban. Well, that means that you're letting the Afghan people live at the mercy of the Taliban. And so it's a difficult decision. And I think for this very reason, there will be some engagement. It'll be limited. We'll have to see. Because you need, at the end of the day, there is a civil society that's not going to go away. States can crumble, but human development, human social, political, economic development isn't something you can reverse. And therefore, it's the duty of the international community to make sure those gains are contained to the extent that it is possible to contain, to sustain them. And therefore, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And we just have to figure it out. But I doubt that'll happen anytime soon. For the next several weeks and months, we're going to see more chaos, unfortunately.
Well, get this. The Taliban states that their transition to their rule and their leadership itself will be peaceful. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it depends on how you define peaceful. A military takeover isn't peaceful. But if what they mean by that is that, a lot of areas were just taken over because people joined them and they didn't have to fire bullets or didn't have to kill a whole lot of people. Yeah, one could argue that it's relatively peaceful, but this isn't by any means over. We're still getting reports of how people are being treated. And we just need to be able to recognize what the Taliban are doing on the ground and not be really persuaded by their smiling spokesmen who are coming on CNN or BBC or other international media and trying to tell us a different story or trying to put a positive spin onto it. So I think that we need to be watchful of that. And it's a difficult situation, but we have to be able to not allow the Taliban to succeed in their information operations that they're currently engaged in.
So more a matter of watching their actions and not just their words.
Absolutely. There's no other way.
Okay. And Kamran, in your opinion, was the Taliban takeover preventable?
Yes, but that had to be done a long, long time ago. The disaster that we saw unfold over the last few days that process started a long time ago when the mission was unclear. It went from disrupting and destroying Al-Qaeda's sanctuary to toppling the regime to then saying, okay, we're going to nation build, and then doing it half-heartedly, then going into Iraq and leaving this business unfinished, and just the waste and the manner in which this whole nation-building process was done. So yes, it could have been prevented. I, for one, believe that if we didn't go to Iraq, which is another disaster, we literally handed that country to Iran because of that. Iran now enjoys far more influence in that country than any other country. But if we hadn't gone to Iraq, focused on Afghanistan, I think that the Taliban would be very different today in the sense that they wouldn't have changed their ideology or changed who they are, but they wouldn't be the kind of force that they are today. They would not have gained this much steam and this much strength because of our mistakes. And I think that the There's nothing that Biden could have done to avert that. Perhaps President Trump should not have fast forwarded an agreement with the Taliban. I wrote about it in December of 2018 in Bloomberg, saying these talks are pointless. And then, Obama should not have done what he did. And you can go back and look at the way that I already spoke about how the Bush administration didn't really engage in nation building in the way it should have been. And there's a bigger question here. Should the United States have engaged in nation building to the scale at which it did? Look, we're talking $1 trillion plus, at least, several thousand troops killed and others injured in 20 years. So if we're gonna do this, then we should have done it far more, smartly and in a far more efficient manner. And it could have been done, but it hasn't been done, and that's the reality that we're going to have to live with.
Yes, unfortunately, in this case, what's done is done, and we can only move forward from here. Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan said, "You take over the other culture and become psychologically subservient. When that happens, please remember it is worse than actual slavery. It is harder to throw off the chains of cultural enslavement. What is happening in Afghanistan now, they have broke the shackles of slavery." What are your thoughts on this statement?
Highly irresponsible, playing politics with the geopolitics that the Prime Minister does not understand. And he's basically appealing to a sentiment in the country, the anti-American sentiment, the anti-Western sentiment, Muslim nationalism sentiment, the Pakistani nationalist sentiment, Islamist currents of various flavors. He's appealing to that. He's trying to, from his point of view, he's trying to leverage this situation to basically portray himself as the one leader of Pakistan who gets it. He's playing the honor card, and the honor card goes a long way in that part of the world. And so that's where he is. And I don't see any good coming out of this. The Pakistani government needs to fix its narrative if it's going to, fix its social and political and economic problems.
Very, very valuable thoughts. And in closing, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share with the viewers about Afghanistan?
Yeah, I just want to sort of urge everybody and use your channel to appeal to people. Look, it's messy, it's ugly, it's a disaster, but let's not get carried away. Let's not be engage in hyperbole. Let's study, understand. Let's not be ideological about this, whether we're right or left of center. We have a mess on our hands. It needs to be solved, and it will not happen if we're fighting, and bickering over Twitter and on social media through partisan lenses.
Great. So you believe that unity is the best way through this?
I believe that there's a need to, I don't know if unity can be achieved, but I do believe that people are capable of far more sophisticated conversations. And if we can have that, then, that's a great start.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. Well, thank you for joining us today, Kamran.
Thank you.
And thanks to the viewers at home for watching. I'm Avaah Blackwell, and you're watching the News Talk at International News Channel. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications to stay up to date on the latest news.